It's been a minute, sir. We're not going to talk Hurricanes here. Hope you've had a good summer. Hope you've had a chance to decompress and get charged up for what is obviously a great football season we're enjoying here.
Yeah, I don't know. Does the words "great" and "football season" even apply anymore in the ACC? I don't know. But
they do not.
No, we're all recharged, and after 2 weeks of this, I'm already burned out again.
My gosh! All right, let's start with the good. NC State's been fun to watch. I mean, I'm not sure that they've got beaten 3 good teams or not. We don't know yet, but they're fun. CJ Bailey. Hollywood Smothers, the receivers. I mean, they're box office. They're fun to watch. What are your thoughts on the Pack through 3 weeks?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how good NC State is. I don't know how much talent they have or any of that. What I do know is they have won 3. The Wolfpack has won 3 games. It absolutely, no doubt in my mind, would have lost at least one of, probably 2, and maybe all 3 in years past.
Right.
And what I've seen from this team so far, the ability to make plays late, the ability to make adjustments like they did against Wake Forest at halftime, the ability to hurt you in any number of different ways on offense, and just sort of an overall mental resilience. It really looks to me like a team that's got it's overused, but some heart and some character, and is really willing to kind of dig deep and do what it takes at the end. Dave Doeren talked after the Wake Forest game that they spent a lot more time this spring and this fall on pressure situations, late game situations, end of half, tried to put the team under as much pressure as they could. I don't know if that's the reason, or you just sort of, luck into the right combination of dudes that just kind of mesh well together and are able to build each other up more than the sum of their parts. But I see a team that has found ways to win games it might have lost before. And that's such an invaluable trait to have. I mean, it basically, what the history of triangle football in general is, teams that lose games they absolutely should have won. And so to see NC State kind of reverse that. And look, it has not been perfect. It probably should not have been in that position against Wake Forest, where it had to basically play a flawless second half, which it did. And it probably shouldn't have been in that position against East Carolina, where it had to lock down on defense late. And it probably shouldn't have been in that position against Virginia, where it needed an interception in the end zone to beat what is, I don't think is going to pan out as a great Virginia team. Obviously better than Virginia Tech, but we're setting the bar very low. So, I mean, I love what I've seen from NC State, not necessarily technically or physically or any of those things. This is a team that gave up a touchdown on the opening kickoff return against Wake, which is like, hey, they're in Winston. What did you expect? But the way that NC State played, especially in the second half, just showed a lot of character, a lot of grit, making the most of what you have. And this has always been, to me, one of those Dave Doeren teams that people were not talking about in July. And I kind of feel like you can just sort of, especially with this schedule, sort of pencil State in for 8 wins those years. It's the years, when everyone's talking about NC State that you get nervous. But, I mean, there's no reason right now NC State can't start 6-0. I don't know how they finished, but that's on the table. Yeah,
well, Luke DeCock from the News and Observer is joining us here on the Adam Gold Show at Luke DeCock on Blue Sky. Here's the thing about, I think this week for them in Durham, I think Duke's better than they've shown. They were so dreadful against Tulane, but the team that played Illinois, they made tons of mistakes, and that's on them. But I think it's a good football team. Regardless, it's going to be I think it'll be an outstanding game coming up on Saturday. But the thing about the Wolfpack is that Doeren talked a lot in the offseason, about they didn't have a togetherness a year ago. And for me, their program has really been about that. That's one of the selling points, I think, that has allowed them to be so usually consistently good, not great. They certainly don't win enough games. But the program itself, I think, is better than the individual teams. And I wonder how much of the program, to use air quotes there, is responsible for being 3-0, because they clearly did work on that type of chemistry relationship in this offseason and the lead up to this one.
Yeah, as we talked about, that they, whether it's what Dave talked about, that it's a focus on more time spent in sort of high leverage, high pressure situations, or it's just the mix of dudes where things work well together. And look, in the recruiting era, if we're going to call it that, it was easier to pick and choose the personalities you were going to have on your roster so they would mesh and work together. And, that was a skill as much as identifying talent or future draft picks or what have you, finding guys who fit what you were trying to do. I mean, not everybody is Nick Saban, gets his pick of the litter. NC State was one of the programs that did a good job finding guys that it could work on and they would get better and improve and be good as juniors and seniors. That era is obviously over, but I think maybe there were some lessons learned in the first couple of years of the transfer portal for NC State, of the open transfer portal, that maybe were applied this offseason, and they've done a better job of getting a roster that fits together. A lot of football still to be played. So to me, the one takeaway that I feel very comfortable with from those first three games is that this is an NC State team that would have contrived to lose one, two, or possibly all three of those games, and instead almost contrived a way to win all three.
Luke DeCock is joining us here in the Adam Gold Show. Your thoughts on North Carolina, who I think opening drive, notwithstanding, very underwhelming through three games, and they've got 2 wins.
Yeah, I mean, they clearly were able to assemble a roster that could compete in the Atlantic 10 or Conference USA. We've established that beyond a doubt now. This is my issue, and this is true of the TCU game. I don't think the issue – I don't look at North Carolina and say coaching is going to be their issue. I think the opening drives and some of the possessions on defense have shown that, there is a bit of a philosophy in place, that the players understand it, that they can be schooled in a scripted situation. I have yet to see ACC level talent collectively in that roster.
Agreed.
Especially on defense. And the fact that, you go back to the TCU game, the 2 best offensive players in the opener were holdovers from the previous regime. And then you've got guys from the previous regime starting at top 5 programs. I just wonder if they spent a lot of money and didn't get much out of it. But we're going to find out. UCF is a good test, obviously. And then you get to Clemson, and we'll see. So my concern would be, at this point, if I'm Bill Belichick, is I may be as good a coach as I sold North Carolina on being. Maybe he is, and maybe him and his staff will get the most out of these players. I just don't know what the ceiling is going to be. You can only get so much blood from a stone. And based on what we've seen so far, I would say they probably are in better shape than Virginia Tech. But again, we're setting a low bar. I think a lot of that is still yet to be seen. And look, when you have this much turnover, and I wrote this after the TCU game, if this had been John Summerall or someone else, they would have been given so much leeway that, hey, new systems, new coaches, new philosophy, new players, a lot of turnover. This is going to take some time. But that's not what we were promised here. We were promised the 33rd NFL team for, whatever UNC is going to end up spending on this staff and roster, $25-30 million. You have to deliver. And to this point, they haven't. But, there's certainly room for improvement. And I think as this staff gets to know the roster better, find out, they may have gotten some guys in the portal who maybe weren't as good as they thought, and they might have some guys who hung around from the previous roster who they can use that they weren't expecting. I think there's every reason to expect that North Carolina will get better. I would be concerned if I were a UNC fan, based on what we've seen so far, what's that ceiling going to be?
Yeah, I don't think they have. They don't even have anything close to ACC level talent. I think Gio Lopez is maybe the 3rd best quarterback on the roster, and I haven't even seen Bryce Baker play. I've seen Max Johnson play, who looked way better. I realize that was game 1, and it was garbage time, but he looked way better than I remembered.
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing, Adam. You can't spend all this money and talk all this talk and do all these things only to put together a roster that's capable of dominating the Sun Belt.
Right. I don't think they are, by the way. I don't think they'd win the Sun Belt.
You don't think they'd win the Sun Belt?
No, I don't. I don't think. I think the Sun Belt's too good for North Carolina. I'm not trying to be flippant. I don't think they have Sun Belt talent.
I was trying to be flippant, and you have taken me seriously and raised the ante. So yes, I think they have with what I've seen, I think they would be very comfortable winning games in Conference USA or the Sun Belt. That's not the league they're in.
They dominated Charlotte, which is unfortunately. Oh, well, I shouldn't say they dominated. They did not dominate Charlotte, which is unfortunate because Charlotte is no good. Although they did pick up their first ever win under the new regime. You mentioned that the Tar Heels will be playing Clemson in a couple of weeks. Look, I know that we were sold that this is the Clemson team with all of their future NFL players that is going to be, bring Clemson back into the college football national picture. It's clear that the offensive line isn't good enough, and Cade Klubnik is just a guy. So they're not going to be able to. Yeah, they're not going to be able to take advantage of this. But lost in all of it is that Georgia Tech might be really good, and I certainly think Miami and Florida State are. So how do you assess what we have seen so far?
Yeah, I mean, I think Clemson's path after the LSU game was always to win the ACC, and that just got a lot tougher. Obviously, Georgia Tech sees a ranked team and wins most of the time. And they've still got Carolina on the schedule, or no, they don't. Clemson does, excuse me. So, I don't know what to make of Clemson other than I agree with you that a lot of Dabo's best teams have been fueled on offense by really exceptional quarterbacks. There's nothing shocking about that. Most great teams are. But he also hasn't shown under multiple offensive coordinators that ability to win with like the Trent Dilfer of college football. Like the Clemson has not been the kind of program that has been able to succeed with a game manager when you look at the history of Clemson football, which is fine because most of the time they've had pretty good quarterbacks. Yeah. So hey, but now you enter a period of time where you've got a guy who is just a guy. It puts your offense under a lot of pressure, and they don't have the Sammy Watkins type playmakers. I mean, Wesco's obviously a very nice player. But they don't. There's no one on that roster who is, there's no one and done playmaking talent on that roster. And as you said, the offensive line is concerning. So it is not a Clemson team that is scoring a ton of points. It is not a Clemson team that is threatening to score a ton of points. It's almost like a Clemson team from that era where every SEC game was 10-3, and they talked about how good the SEC defenses were, and not how there wasn't a quarterback in the entire league. Clemson is in trouble from a college football playoff perspective because there are tough games left on their schedule, and they're now in a position where they probably can't lose 2 games and win the ACC, and that was their path. So it's actually probably pretty bad for the ACC because Clemson's brand value, gives it a huge advantage in any conversation about at-large teams or seeding. I don't think people are going to be that excited about, Georgia Tech or anyone else from the ACC forcing their way into that conversation who aren't in the ACC. And then you get into a, Florida State without a quarterback situation where, hey, here you are in your own championship game and ESPN is lobbying against your league. Those knives will come out if the ACC is in that position.
By the way, Georgia Tech, they do not play a ranked team right now until Georgia at the end of the season. So maybe that's trouble. But I've loved what I have seen from the Yellow Jackets. And nobody really wanted to be in this situation, trusting Mario Cristobal with a Ferrari, but they've got a good squad, and it looks like Carson Beck is at least close to being the Carson Beck of a few years ago, and Florida State's good too. Unfortunately, those two teams are going to play each other in a couple of weeks, so one of them is going to take an L. But at least the league's got 2 high-profile teams that will figure to be in the mix the rest of the way. Miami's schedule, though, is murderous if you look at it now.
Yeah, I mean, you can downgrade Florida for sure. But the rest of it is, I mean, they got Virginia Tech, but they got to go to Pitt. They got to play NC State. They got to go to SMU, and we're still kind of trying to figure out who is.
Right.
Got to play Louisville and obviously Florida State. But I will give Miami credit. And this is not something I normally do flippantly or willingly. To beat Notre Dame, and I don't care about the Texas A&M game. I still think Notre Dame is good.
Yeah.
I think South Florida is really good. Maybe not CFP caliber, but that is a team that you better be ready to play. That is an extremely well-coached team. And Miami blew the doors off them. So there's a lot to like about the Hurricanes. If the ACC ends up at the end of the year with Miami, Florida State having beaten each other one way or the other, I think the league will be in good shape. But there's a lot between here and there.
And the other thing, I mean, again, they've been better against ranked teams, but Georgia Tech, they're better than everybody else left on their schedule other than Georgia. Everybody else. They just beat the toughest team on their schedule, not named Georgia. Georgia Tech did. And I love Brent Key. So who would you rather watch? The Panthers or paint dry?
I was telling someone yesterday he was saying the Panthers are a hard habit to break, and I said we need an Ozempic for Panthers fans.
They're not a hard habit to break at all.
Well, look, man, I wrote, 4 years ago? Stop watching these guys. Stop wasting your time. And what's changed? In the interim, they fired 2 coaches and drafted a 5'3" quarterback. So, I mean, I don't know why you would go back. The Panther, I'd rather watch Georgia Tech. I mean, Haynes King is a more exciting quarterback. There's something about the Panthers organization.
Yeah.
And obviously we start with the owner. That just makes it impossible to get any traction or make any progress. And the quality of football on display is just garbage. And they're now in a position where they're going to have to bottom out and draft another quarterback, which is so now you got another 3 to 4 years of this. And you want to watch it have fun. We've talked about this a lot. The Panthers are very relevant in the triangle when they are in the playoffs.
Yeah.
I think people come out of the woodwork for the Panthers when there's a playoff game to watch. They're not super relevant when they're not in the playoffs. They're certainly not relevant at the moment. But when you had a situation like we did at the end of last year where WRAL took the Commanders over the Panthers, what have the Panthers done since then to solidify their position? And the answer is nothing.
Yeah. You and I disagree on Bryce.
I like Teteroa McMillan.
I love
him.
I do.
Yeah, that's a good pick.
Yeah, you and I do disagree on Bryce. I think there is a quarterback there, but I think the bigger problem right now is the head coach, and that's going to have to change before we can even address the quarterback. But it's obviously not going to change until after this season is over.
I mean, I will say this for Bryce Young: Sam Darnold left the Panthers and has had at least one really good year.
Baker Mayfield
left the Panthers and has had at least one really good year.
Yep.
Kyle Allen left the Panthers, and he was never any good anyway, despite the tremendous media push in Charlotte to turn him into Steve Young or something.
Taylor Heineke. Neither him.
No. But Sam Darnold was a guy who they said, we can reclaim, we can get the most out of this guy. And they couldn't, someone else did. Baker Mayfield was a guy we could reclaim. They probably would have made a run at Deshaun Watson if he would have come here. Turned out differently. Right. Well, and obviously having the chance to draft a quarterback changes things too. But,
oh my gosh.
and you look how good C.J. Stroud was as a rookie. And obviously the results since haven't been the same, but if you put him in that offense that first year with Frank Reich, is it any better? I don't know. Maybe it's not.
No.
But I'm just saying that there's a lot of evidence that this is not a place where you're going to succeed as a quarterback, no matter who the coach is.
No doubt about it. Luke DeCock here on the Adam Gold Show. I appreciate your time, sir. I'll see you soon.
Yes, sir.